Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Survivor Becomes a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 120, Vidmori Point of View. Isak sat in silence beside me, even though he said that he was ready for a talk. He was still thinking just about what he should say. After another quiet minutes of just listening to the river coursing past us, he finally spoke up. So, Vidmori, you've killed before, right? How do you handle something like that? I nodded intently, thinking about his words for a moment. It all depends on who I killed, why I killed, and how I killed them. Sometimes I feel nothing, just numb to the moment. Other times I felt satisfied, even almost happy at times that a certain someone was dead, and that I was the one to put them down. Then there were the times where I felt sick to my stomach, full of remorse that I was the one who killed that person, and cursing the world for the things that led me up to that point. Isak nodded slowly, and I could tell that it wasn't exactly what he was looking for or wanted to hear. But he had more questions, and I was willing to answer them. What was it like, the first time you killed someone? He asked, looking at me now as I felt his eyes intently studying my face and expression. I sighed for no reason other than to sigh as I scratched the back of my head. Well, I'll tell you 2 times I killed. The very first, and the first time I killed somebody who didn't deserve it. Isak looked on with interest, but didn't say a word in response as I continued. I was around 16 years old. It was a few years before everything went to shit, as it was normal society. There was still a government-instituted justice system, with generally good moral fiber and common sense of what was right and wrong amongst the majority of society. I closed my eyes as I recalled the day of the first time I killed someone. At this point, it felt like it was multiple lifetimes ago, but after all that dream-walking I had done with Ravida and Rita, I could remember it like it was yesterday. I was in a sort of a guild that my family had founded. We served wealthy merchants and politicians, ensuring that their property and persons were protected. I was assigned to a job to protect some merchant's son while they were traveling, and was tasked to accompany him and pretend to be a part of his group of friends while they were on the trip. There were other guards, of course, who were older, stronger, and allowed to be better equipped than myself. In my world, and during the era that I grew up in, it wasn't common to have to fight for your life in most countries, and it was even less common to be armed and armored outside of conflict zones. I explained, looking to Isak now to make sure that he was at least understood the picture that I was painting for him. He was a little confused about a couple things as far as I could tell, but he looked like he understood the general information I set up for him as he watched me with intent curiosity for the rest of my story. As far as the guy I was protecting knew, I was just the son of his father's new business partner, and nothing more. We'd spent the better part of a week just going places and hanging out, and we got along well enough. Things were as quiet as they could be, and it looked like my job was going to end without me needing to do anything. Well, that was of course when things went bad. I mused a little, sighing softly as I gazed into the water. The carriage we were taking got hijacked by some kidnappers, mercenaries hired by his father's competitor. But that doesn't really matter in the context of the story. The next thing I knew, the 2 of us were in some kind of warehouse on the docks, getting ready to be loaded onto a boat to make it harder for my guild to find us. I closed my eyes again as I visualized the day. We were locked in a storage room, arms bound behind our backs and gagged, and with only one way in and out. Since it was my job to make sure he was safe, I knew that I had to do whatever it took to not end up on that boat. So after discreetly escaping my bindings, I caused a scene. I started screaming through my gag, kicking the walls and the doors and just making a lot of noise. Of course, I would have never actually gotten anyone's attention, but I kept it up and managed to frustrate the one kidnapper guarding the room. I say while holding up a finger to emphasize my point. Well, to say that he was frustrated was an understatement, especially since I wasn't the main target. The only reason I was taken was to try and sweeten the pot so they could possibly get more out of the merchant. So he was rough with me, kicking me in my stomach and stomping on my chest to get me to shut up. I couldn't help but smirk a little as I reflected on that moment. I put on such a convincing act playing a sniveling coward, crying and begging for my life. Once he had me whimpering from the pain, he turned to leave. And that's when I sprung into action and jumped on his back. I locked my legs around his waist to prevent him from going for his weapon, while hooking my arms around his throat and squeezing as hard as I could to try and knock him out. I couldn't help but sigh again as I scratched my cheek. Except I screwed up. In the heat of the moment, I didn't get the technique right, and I was only barely choking the kidnapper out. Now fighting for his life, he slammed me hard against the wall several times and did his best to pull me off his back and maybe even kill me. I had no choice. Now it was me or him, and I wasn't about to let it be him. So I snapped his neck, and he went slack. Looking at Isak, he was still listening with rapt attention. At that moment, I was running off of the adrenaline high and probably had a concussion, so I wasn't thinking all too hard about what I just did. I took his weapons, freed the guy I was protecting, and used the kidnapper's magic tool to contact my parents and update them on the situation. From there, the only thing to do was to fortify the room we had originally been trapped in and stay put. The kidnappers weren't aware that we were free and that help was on the way, so the best way to keep them in the dark was to pretend that nothing changed. My family's guild came in soon enough, took down the kidnappers, and my charge was safe. From there, I was praised for my actions. My parents and guild were proud of me for what I was able to accomplish at my age. They even assigned me my own team so that I could take charge of jobs and assignments going forward, now that I'd proven myself without a shadow of a doubt that I was skilled enough to not only protect myself, but others in the field. I didn't feel like I earned it, though. I looked over at Isak and shrugged a bit. If I had practiced more, I would have had better control of myself. And then the man would have lived past that day, since I would have simply knocked him out when his death wouldn't have been at my hands. He only died because I wasn't competent enough to take him down alive, and that's what scares me now that I've reflected on it. I was more worried by the fact that I didn't do it right, rather than the fact that the man was dead because of me. Isak bobbed his head thoughtfully and considered the story so far. You had to kill him. It was your job, and ultimately it was done to defend a person in your care and yourself, he responded, before looking at me again. You weren't in the wrong, and you should be proud of yourself for taking down someone stronger than you. Right? He asked, with uncertainty in his voice. I nodded once before looking over at him again. You know, I learned later in life that killing without purpose is a waste, and one must never be wasteful. I took great pains to ensure that I didn't kill most of who crossed me or those under my protection. As for most cases, they were just desperate people who needed their needs to be met. Once they were allowed food, water, medicine, and all safety, they were willing to work and follow the rules to ensure they continued to receive those things for themselves and their loved ones. I looked away and sighed a bit as I watched the water once more. Now, of course, you must be mindful of those who cannot be reasoned with, those who will take advantage of your mercy and kindness or ignore it outright, and act cruelly for cruelty's sake. And it's against those people you must not hold back for, as they will cause even more damage to you and those you care for when given half the chance. There will come many times in your life and in your line of work that you will have to kill another for the sake of others. This will be something that is expected of you, whether you're slaying some kind of beast or a person you've only met mere seconds ago. Like with all things, killing will get easier as time goes on. But with that in mind, you must always take time to reflect on what you've done so that the idea of taking life doesn't become too easy. Never allow yourself to become numb to the act of taking a life of a person. I could sense that Isak was intimidated by my rather intense beliefs and views. So I opted to dial it back and stood and began pouring out stone and wood from my storage space. After some thinking, I decided that I would build a bridge across the river, and I should be able to make a sturdy one that'll last a while with the materials I had on hand. Then again, your world still has a structure and society. There's a future here and a sense of security I haven't seen in decades, even despite your current circumstances. For someone like you who's just starting out, I would say you need to decide on who or what you're fighting for. It can be anything. An ideal, a cause, or for a goal. I then offer him a bit of a smile as I shape stone anchors which will make up the foundations of the bridge. It could even be a person, someone you want to make the world a better place for. Isaac looked confused, to say the least, still sitting by the riverside as he watched the running water before him looking over at me. Is that really all there is to it? That's all I need to think about when it comes down to killing. I tilted my head a little before looking back at him and used my magic to shape and carve the stone of logs into manageable posts before planting them into the stone anchors and using magic to fuse the wood to the stone, almost as if the stone were cement. Like I told you the other day, it's all about your mindset. You're not going out into the world trying to kill someone. What you're doing is fighting to protect your ideals and beliefs, or to protect someone. It can be a loved one, or it can be the villagers of a community asking you for help. Or it can even be your brother or sister in arms in the midst of a battle. At the end of the day, you should strive to be a protector, someone who will fight for the sake of others. By no means will you ever be a weapon to be used indiscriminately. As I spoke, I pulled the anchors and posts back into my storage, before pouring out some more stone from my storage and shaping them fairly heavy blocks around my feet. Taking a minute to test my weight and mobility, I started walking into the river, going waist deep into the water before pulling the anchors from my storage, only to then use my earth magic to bury them into the riverbed, while my new stone shoes kept my light wooden body from being washed away. I could feel Isaac starting to get better understanding of what I was getting at, though he was still rather curious about something. Getting to his feet, he walked closer to the water bridge, watching me intently as I worked at building the bridge. What about the first time you killed someone who didn't deserve it? You said that you'd tell me about that too. I internally winced at him reminding me to talk about that. I probably shouldn't have mentioned that when I would talk about it, but it would do him good to hear about wasteful loss of life. I don't think I'll ever talk about this with anyone now that I consider it. It wasn't just one person. There was a whole group of them. 9 people died when they shouldn't have, and I led the team that killed them all. What happened? Isaac asked, and I could sense that he wasn't particularly judging me, but was curious nonetheless. I pulled more wood from my storage and proceeded to flesh out the frame of the bridge, carving out slots in order to fit wood onto the posts in the anchors without needing to use any kind of nails to keep them framed together. I was leading a strike team. We were out hunting a group of bandits that were operating in the area, robbing passing survivors and supply lines. It was a relatively small group as far as we knew, so they didn't have to steal often, but they did it enough to be a pain in our sides. Done with the bare bones of the frame, I slowly make my way out of the water before using some concentrated gusts of wind magic to dry myself off. I had spent the latter half of the month scouting out the area in order to find the bandits' base, and succeeded in my efforts. Within the week, I had my team ready to attack. When night came, we made our advance, and the scene we came across was grisly. The bandits had just finished having a battle of their own. Bodies littered the outpost, and those that survived were looting the corpses, stripping them of everything of worth before tossing them into a bonfire for cremation. Why would they burn the bodies like that? I mean, cremation is not an uncommon practice. But why burn them? He asked with a simple curiosity. I scratched my cheek, thinking about how to best answer that question. It was just, more efficient that way. There wasn't space to do burials in the most communities, and it was overall the cleanest method, which prevented the spread of the disease from rotting corpses, and also kept the zombies from eating their corpses and being attracted to the rot. I could tell he felt no comfort in that answer, and I could appreciate the sentiment that he had for treating the dead with respect. It's been a long time since I could afford the sentiment myself. Not that death really means much to me now that I consider it. In any case, we struck first. It was a quiet affair, and the people I picked to be there were some of the best combatants my community had to offer. Using a mix of knives, bows, and crossbows, we eliminated everyone that was there. I personally took down 2 of them, a bolt through the ear for one, and 2 thrown knives in the neck for the other. It was quick, clean, and quiet. We suffered no losses and no injuries. Plus, we now had all their resources as well as their equipment of the victims, which meant more all round for the people of my community. I explained, forcing false enthusiasm into retelling of the story, since it was nothing but positives at that point. Isak nodded intently, but then he frowned a little.
So you regretted killing those bandits? Why, you just said that they were terrorizing your people and other groups in the area.
With that, I just sighed as I began laying boards of wood over the frame I had built and carefully fusing the boards to the frame to make one piece. You're right. The bandits were causing trouble for my group and for other people. The problem is that another group had the same idea our group did and, well, communication wasn't all that great in the beginning. Isak had to take a moment to consider what I just said, but he figured it out soon enough as a look of shock came across his face.
By the gods, you killed the ones who just killed the bandits.
I nodded silently, fitting another board into place while reshaping it into my needs. It was an honest mistake, but that doesn't excuse the loss of life. It was from that day on I began changing my methods. Whenever possible, I would take people alive, if only to avoid repeating that mistake ever again. I glanced back at Isak, who looked more pensive than anything before speaking up as he watched me.
But like you said, there are some people who can't be afforded that kind of mercy, right?
I offered a nod as I got back to focusing on the bridge. That's the truth of the matter at the end of the day, Isak. But for now, you should just focus on your training. You won't be making those kinds of decisions anytime soon. After all, you're still an apprentice, and you still have plenty of time to learn just what it means to behold the blade or any other sort of weapon for the sake of others. Isak watched the water for a time before standing as he walked closer to me on the bridge.
Thank you for your time, Vitmari. I appreciate the wisdom that you've shared with me today. I think you've given me a lot to consider. I have to get back to training now. Though, if it's all right with you, can we have another talk sometime?
I couldn't help but smile a bit as I made my way over to him, properly meeting his gaze and offering a nod. Sure, Isak, my door is always open to you. He looked a little confused by the door comment, but he notably brightened as he lowered his head respectfully for a moment and stood tall once more.
I'll be off now.
With that, he made his way off, leaving me to the bridge. Survivor point of view. My men loot with delight as they fill the trucks with the stolen goods and equipment. The bandits had so much stockpiled, they will likely have to make a second trip to get it all back home. It's good that they've been cleared out, and the outpost is a surprisingly good place. I'll have to see if we can spare some people to maintain this location for future use. But all the dead bandits don't matter right now. The problem I have is all the survivors that my men just killed. The damning evidence being this journal that I just pulled from one of the corpses. These folk come from the Riverside community to the east. Damn it! Why, today of all days did you have to be here? Weeks of tracking only to be second to the goal. My eyes go over to my men as they chatter cheerfully enough. The pride of their faces plain to see after helping get rid of a problem that's been plaguing all of us for so long. If any of them learned the truth of what they did today, the guilt would ruin them. One of the guys walked up with a cheerful grin on his face as he just juts a thumb over to the trucks. Hey boss, we found a crate of Twinkies in the storeroom over there, and they're all still good. Want one? I force a smile on my face as I look over to him and bob my head. Yeah, sure. We all deserve a treat after today. Just make sure not to eat too much. I want to see the looks on the kids' faces when they start handing out those sweets, I muse, tucking the journal away in my coat as I followed him over to the others. Though, as we walked past the bonfire with the bandit corpses, I flicked the journal into the fire and watched as the pages burn up in flames. What was that, boss? He asked curiously, still in a relatively good mood as he glanced over to the bonfire for a moment. Nothing much, just a journal full of sick fantasies, I mused with a shrug. Let's get the rest of these bodies burning before we're out of here. We shouldn't let the smell of rot set in. He nodded intently, his good mood unimpeded. Of course, boss. We'll get right on it. End of chapter. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps. DragonSoup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Sevaren Serberous, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Lightjock, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Lord Azrekahl. Thank you very much.